Now joining me on the Peerless Boilers hotline, Peerless Builds, America's Best Boilers, is the voice of the New York Knicks, Rangers, and who will be on the call for the Jets-Giants game this week, and that is Kenny Albert. Kenny, Zach Gelb here, TalkUSA.tv. Thank you for joining me, and how are you on this fine evening?
Very good, Zach. How are you?
I'm doing great. Great to have you back on. I know 24/7 is on tonight on HBO. How do you think they're going to portray that 0.1 tenth of a second left goal? Because that was just great stuff. How do you like 24/7 so far?
It was very enjoyable. The first show last week, I had a chance to watch it while I was in St. Louis with the Rangers in the hotel, and enjoyed the series last year with Pittsburgh and Washington. So we'll see what they have in store this week as far as that last-second goal in Phoenix on Saturday night, and some of the stuff that went on with the Flyers this week as well. So it's about 2.5 hours away, but I'm looking forward to it.
Over under 10.5 times that John Tortorella curses this week.
Well, we'll have to wait and see. I know it'll be hard to break Bruce Boudreau's record from last year's shows.
So let's get right to it with the New York Rangers. Hagelin, Stefan, and Anisimov, they just looked so great last night against the New Jersey Devils. Talk about those young guys and the start they've got off to this season in the NHL.
Well, you're right, Zach. It was a bit of a slow start. You know, the Rangers only had 4 shots in the first period, but then right around the middle portion of the second period, that top line came alive with Stefan, Anisimov, and Gaborik scoring the first 2 goals. And you mentioned Carl Hagelin, who's been terrific in his 13 games with the team, scored a shorthanded goal, which gave the Rangers a 3-1 lead. And don't forget about Henrik Lundqvist. He made some unbelievable saves last night. Allowed the goal, in the first period to Zajac on a rebound, a third chance attempt. But after that, he shut the door. He was named the #1 star. And, it was an exciting game. The crowd was into it. It was the latest the Rangers and Devils have gone into a season without playing each other. It was game number 31 for the Rangers, game number 33 for the Devils, and first of 6, between the two clubs this year. But, some fireworks right at the start, and the Rangers come away with the victory.
Gabby didn't have a great year in the playoffs last year, and I know he was a little bit concussed, and he didn't have the best season in the world, and it just looks like he's a completely different player this year. Do you believe the notion that Richards took a little pressure off him, and now Gaborik isn't the man with that title in that Rangers locker room? Because he's just been playing with his heart and soul on the ice this year.
He has been, and I guess Richards probably has something to do with it. The fact that they brought in another top forward, to take some of the heat off Gaborik, and to, not similar players at all. Gaborik, the goal scorer, Richards, more of a setup man, plays the point on the power play, terrific passer. And it didn't really click between those guys earlier in the year, but once John Tortorella split them up, things have gone real well for the team. They've had, 4 solid lines, but especially the top 2. And you're right, last year was a real down year for Gaborik. Scored 42 goals 2 years ago. And then last year, suffering through some injuries, groin, hamstring, and, played through it for the most part, but did not have a good year, like you said. And this year he's been one of the top players in the league. He has 19 goals, one off the league lead, Steven Stamkos of Tampa Bay with 20, and scored 2 last night, one, of course, into the empty net. But he's been terrific. Richards has been a real good addition to the team. And you mentioned some of the young guys with Anisimov and Hagelin. And, last night we saw a couple of defensemen up from Connecticut. Tim Erickson, who had played in 9 games earlier this year, and Stu Bickle, who made his NHL debut and played pretty well. He kept things simple and even picked up an assist on the Hagelin shorthanded goal.
And there's still a lot of potential left in this team, and they are missing their best defender in Mark Staal. What's the latest on him health-wise?
Well, it's sounding a little better the last couple of days, Zach. He's been skating with the team, skated with the team for the first time in Carolina a couple of weeks ago. He's been traveling with the team, and, he's made some comments in the last couple of days that he might not be too far off. So he hasn't set a date yet, as far as returning, but the progress, does certainly seem like it's being made, as far as a potential return date. Michael Sauer, not sure with regard to his concussion. He has not been skating with the team, so we'll have to keep our fingers crossed on Sauer. But the guys stepped up last night, like I said, Erickson and Bickle. They're also going to have Steve Eminger, who separated his shoulder, and Jeff Wojcicki was out last night. So, it just shows that they do have the depth with the Connecticut Whale, the farm team in the American Hockey League, and they play the same system down there, so these guys are ready when they get called up to the big club.
We're talking to Kenny Albert, and Kenny will be on the call this Saturday, Christmas Eve, Jets-Giants, 1 p.m. at MetLife Stadium. And Kenny, it's going to probably be a great day come Thursday and Friday for you, because you get to cover the Jets and the Giants, and you get to talk to Antrel Rolle and Santonio Holmes. It's probably going to be exciting to talk to those two loudmouths.
Well, I'm really looking forward to the next 2 days, Zach. We will get out to Jets practice tomorrow and talk to Rex Ryan and a bunch of the players, and then we'll do the same thing with the Giants on Friday. Normally we go to the home team on Friday for a Sunday game, and then we see the visiting team when they get into their hotel late Saturday afternoon. In fact, I think you and I have spoken a couple of times on the show while I've been waiting for that visiting team to get in on a Saturday.
Yep.
So the difference is this time, we'll get to go to both teams' facilities, watch practice, and should be a lot of fun. I can't wait. I mean, when you think back to the history of New York sports, I think excluding the postseason, of course, we had the Subway Series and some great Ranger Islander, Ranger Devil, Nick Nets series. Not including the postseason, this has to be the most important game between two New York teams since 1951. Since the shot heard around the world. Technically, that was an extension of the regular season. That was not a postseason series, the 3 games between the Dodgers and Giants. So I think as far as the regular season goes, there probably hasn't been one as big as that, and that was 60 years ago.
Did you have any problem with Rex Ryan not sitting down Santonio Holmes after that dopey celebration that he had in Philadelphia?
Yeah, I mean, it's tough because, obviously it's not something that Holmes should have done, and he knows that, and his teammates know that, and the coaching staff knows that. But, you're so deep in the season where you have to try and win games. Now, I know the score was out of hand in the game on Sunday, so perhaps he should have at that point. But, I'm sure he handled it internally, and we'll talk to him about it a little bit tomorrow. But, not what you want to see from the players in those situations.
And the Jets' offensive line has been dreadful this season. They don't have an easy task going up against the Giants' pass rush this week. I know the Giants' pass rush hasn't been great as of late, but I have to imagine that they get some success this week up against Wayne Hunter and Matt Slauson.
Well, Jason Pierre-Paul's been terrific, as you know, with the 13.5 sacks, and he's had a tremendous year. Of course, Human Europe and Tuck with the injuries. OSU's missed the last 3 games, and Tuck's been battling injuries, so we'll have to wait and see who's healthy. But you're right, that should be fun to watch, especially with DeBrickashaw Ferguson over at left tackle. And you mentioned Wayne Hunter, who did not exactly have a fine day against Jason Babin on Sunday over in Philly. So that'll certainly be one of the matchups that I'm sure Tony Siragusa down in the field will be keeping a very close eye on.
We're talking to Kenny Albert. And Kenny, do you think the Jets will come out throwing this week? That Giants secondary has not been great as of late.
Yeah, it's a good question. We'll see. All this talk about the ground and pound with regard to the Jets, but like you said, the Giants secondary, they're ranked 29th. They've given up the 4th most yards in the league and struggled last week against Washington. So it'll be interesting to see how things play out right at the start.
And one of the most compelling situations to me going into this game is who is Revis going to get the majority of coverage on? Do you think he's going to go after Cruz or Hakeem Nicks? Because it's a tough decision to make, I'm sure, for Gang Green.
No, you're right. That's another great question. What do you do with Revis? What do you do with Cromartie? Cruz and Hicks both having outstanding seasons, both 1,000-yard receivers. First time the Giants have ever had 2 in one season, which is amazing, when you think back to the 87-year history of the club. And what a story Cruz is. He kind of jumped onto the scene in that preseason game against the Jets last year when he scored the 3 touchdowns and then saw limited action during the regular season. And then this year he's got a great chance to break Amani Toomer's franchise record for receiving yards. He needs 150 over these last 2 games. So a tremendous story, a local product, of course, and he's been a lot of fun to watch. I worked that game in Arizona, the controversial play at the end where he gave himself up, and the ruling went the Giants' way, and he's taken off from there.
You look at the Giants' offense, and they've been very up and down this year. You look at the final 5 minutes of that Cowboys game, and that could be the apex of their season if they don't get the job done in the final 2 weeks of the season. And then they just looked so terrible last week against the Washington Redskins. What did you notice last week that the Giants weren't doing against the Washington Redskins that they could improve on going into this week?
It just seemed like everything was out of sync last week, right from the start with the drop by Knicks early, when he said he lost it in the sun, and even though they had the interceptions early, just looked out of sync. And if you're the Giants and you want to go to the playoffs, you can't lose twice to Washington, a team that's gone 3-9 otherwise in their other 12 games. I think when you look at the Giants' season, Zach, probably hasn't gone, aside from the 2 Washington losses, hasn't gone too far away from what most people, including myself, expected. Now, I know they lost to Seattle, but you can kind of, cancel that out with the New England win, which was unexpected. So, I think you knew early on that they had a favorable schedule, and they went 6-2 over their first 8. And then they had that, November stretch where they had to play New England, San Francisco, Philadelphia, New Orleans, and Green Bay, 5 in a row against those teams. So they did come out with the win, of course, over New England. But I really don't think the season's gone. Before the season, when you look at the schedule, I think I probably would have said at this time 7-7 or 8-6, somewhere in that range.
And we can't talk football this year without mentioning the name Tim Tebow. I know you had the Chicago Bears-Denver Broncos game. Impressions so far with number 15?
Totally impressed. I was there 2 weeks ago for the game against Chicago, and he sat down with us, with Moose and Goose and I, for about a half hour on the Friday before the game. And such an impressive kid. I had never met him before, and he won us over, I'll tell you that. I think Goose set a record by not swearing for about a half hour with Tim Tebow in the room. He was on his best behavior, Tony was. But great kid, head on his shoulders, terrific upbringing, told us about, championships at the Pop Warner level at the age of 7, and then at 2 different high schools, and, of course, in college twice. And all he ever wanted to do was become an NFL quarterback, and his dream came true. But I can't say enough about the type of person that he was, at least from the 30 minutes that I sat with him. We watched him before practice for about a half hour, out of the field throwing the ball. He stayed out for a half hour after practice with a couple of receivers. And also to hear his teammates and coaches talk about him in such glowing terms. Brian Dawkins, a 16-year veteran who, has been mesmerized by this guy. And, usually he's on the sideline sitting down, taking a break, taking a breather when the defense isn't on the field. Dawkins, Champ Bailey, a 13-year veteran, they're all standing up watching. So it's been a great story. Obviously a bump in the road last week against New England, but that game we did was incredible down the stretch, down 10-0 with 2.5 minutes left. And it wasn't all Tebow in that game. You had Marion Barber running out of bounds. You had Barber stripped of the ball in overtime. You had Matt Prater hitting the 59-yard field goal right at the end of regulation, then the 51-yarder in overtime. So it wasn't all about Tebow, but he was 3 for 16 over the first 3 quarters, and then 16 for 20 in the fourth. So he certainly did have a lot to do with the comeback.
I heard Ian Eagle talking about Tim Tebow, and the thing that he was so impressed about was that every time he talked to Ian, he said, Mr. Eagle, Mr. Eagle. Did he call you Mr. Albert?
No, he actually called me Mr. Eagle. I can't remember if he called me Mr. Albert, but he did refer to us as Sir often throughout the meeting. And, very respectful, answered the questions, all the questions that we asked. So, again, can't say enough about how impressed I was with him.
Zach Gelb here on TalkUSA.tv talking to the great Kenny Albert. And Kenny, a few more questions right before we let you run. Now let's transition a little bit over to the New York Knicks. They start their season this Sunday up against the Boston Celtics. Tip-off is at noon at MSG. And the one question mark with the Knicks, in my opinion, going into this season is who's going to start at point guard. Are they going to go by a point guard by committee right here to start off, or are they going to have one guy that's going to be getting the majority of the minutes?
Well, that's a good question. I guess we'll have to wait and see. And they're in action tonight in the preseason against the Nets. And I was real fortunate to get to fill in over the last couple of years with Clyde Frazier on MSG. Not sure exactly what the schedule is going to look like this year, as far as my involvement. But should be a great year as far as the Knicks are concerned. And, I guess for the moment you have to say Tony Douglas and Landry Fields in the backcourt with the Baron Davis health situation. But, I think back to 3 years ago when Mike D'Antoni first came in and Donnie Walsh, and, here we are. It seemed like such a long 2 years with so many losses, and, they went through, 25, 30, 35 players over those 2 seasons, and then last year, obviously, adding Stoudemire during the offseason, and then the trade for Carmelo Anthony, and, now you have Mike D'Antoni coming out saying that he feels they can be a championship contender. So I know Knicks fans have waited a long time, but it should be a real fun year.
Last one here as we're talking to Kenny Albert. They brought in Tyson Chandler this offseason, which I just thought was a brilliant move because it just improves them on the defensive side of the ball, which the Knicks do have some lacking in. But it really lets Amari Stoudemire play at his natural position, which is the 4. How much does that help Amari Stoudemire not having to bounce back from the 5 and the 4 like he did last year?
No, absolutely. Should be a tremendous addition with Chandler coming in. And, not only is he a good player and terrific defensively and rebounding, but I don't know him personally, but you hear such good things about him as a player, as a guy in the locker room. So that should be a huge addition to this Knicks squad.
Kenny, thanks so much. Enjoy the game on Sunday, and happy holidays, happy Hanukkah to you and your family as well.
You too, Zach. Thanks a lot.
Kenny Albert joining us right there on the Peerless Boilers hotline. Peerless builds America's best boilers. A great spot there with the MSG and Fox broadcaster. Once again, Kenny will be on the call this Saturday for Jets-Giants, and that's going to be a phenomenal matchup with the playoff implications that are on the line. But we're going to take a quick break. When we get back, we'll talk about the incident that has happened at Ohio State University, one school that's going to be a little bit ticked off with the ruling that the NCAA board gave them, and then we will get to the highly anticipated Peerless Boilers picks of the week, as well as Dope of the Day with Danny Kane. Back after this.